Electric Cafe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's day number 19 on my January 2025 focus month on 60s, 70s, and 80s. And this one actually goes in the 90s. This one's actually the newest record I've reviewed. And just experimental music, ambient music, new age music, all the kind of releases in those years. I actually picked this record as part of the 30 days, and I was thinking it was more towards the early 90s. I thought it was like 92 or 93 for some reason in my head, but it was actually 97. Here's the original copy on vinyl. I do also have it on CD as well from the awesome Darla Records, which they did a lot of great ambient related music. So Wendy and Carl were is a project out of Michigan, and again, this is their 1997 album. This it was Carl Hultgren and Wendy Weber from Michigan, and they sort of do like a experimental kind of mix of ambient, a little bit of space rock, touch of psychedelic rock, but mostly it's kind of drony ambient music, with a little bit of guitar in there as well, and it's a kind of electronic guitar, so it's not necessarily like an acoustic guitar or anything like that. So it's kind of verging on drone and a sort of or even a shoegaze, like an ambient shoegaze sort of sound, in many ways. This album is 41 minutes long. There's three tracks. Um, all in all, I think as far as like the overall, I really like the nice textures. There's good layering, good effects use. Just the overall sound. It's sort of like post punk and ambient is kind of an interesting vibe. And for the mid 90s, I think that was fairly groundbreaking for the time. Not too many people were doing a sort of shoegaze ambient sound in a lot of ways, especially out of Michigan. Um, it's definitely one of the more better guitar ambient albums of the 90s, in my opinion. And again, the shoegaze sort of aspect is nice because they sort of have that evolving guitar kind of that kind of effects, kind of droning cadence. The cadences are kind of shimmering out, just kind of sound like guitars with a lot of echo. And I'm always a big fan of anything kind of like post punk sound, and post punk ambient is pretty creative for the time. So track number one is called Antarctica, title track. I really like the deep bass, deeper bass notes on this one. Again, it's kind of like a shoegaze meets sort of like a field recording. There's some occasional guitar notes in there. Um, the resonance kind of echoes out. There's a little bit of cello in here. It sounds like there's some drone in here. Around 17, 18 minutes, they sort of evolve into a little bit of a higher tones, and it sort of loses a little bit the lower frequencies. So it's sort of evolving, not only musically but also sort of um, you know just sort of in the frequencies. It's just sort of evolving into the high side too, almost to the point where it almost sounds a little bit folk sounding, losing out all the bass. The kind of ambient and shoegaze almost becomes like a folk sound, which is really interesting as well. Brings like another level of dynamics to the album and to the song. Really strong song. I give it three and a quarter stars. The second track, called Traveling, is my least favorite of the three. It does remind me of Wolfgang Voigt. If you guys like the 90s and 2000 compact label owner, Wolfgang Voigt is aka Gas, his Gas project. It sounds a little bit like that in some ways. It's a pretty good song, but it doesn't really go anywhere for the most part. It definitely feels like an in between track for the two tracks, and maybe in some ways it's sort of it sort of bridges the two pieces together and sort of becomes that middle ground, um, sort of bridging the two better songs together. I don't know if it was necessarily meant to do that, but I think it does a good job of that. But I think it doesn't stand on itself, stand by itself in as much as it could. So I give it 2.25 stars. And then the last track is called Sunshine. This one's a bit more substantial guitar work on here. Um, this one probably evolves the best. It's definitely my favorite track. There's some moments where it reminds me of Manuel, who also released on Darla Records. Um, so I can see it definitely fits in if you like Manuel, or if you like Wendy and Carl. Check out Manuel's stuff. Um, this track makes for a nice conclusion and it's sort of like the pinnacle of albums. So it really feels like you've kind of finally, wouldn't say finally because it's 41 minutes, but in some ways it's kind of finally, it kind of resonates and resolves itself to a point where there's a feeling like a conclusion or satisfactory that you sort of, I don't know, maybe you made the trek to Antarctica. I don't know, maybe they that's sort of the theme behind the album is a trip to Antarctica. I always appreciate themes in ambient related music, so maybe that's the idea is because there is sort of a feeling of euphoricness as this album and as the song sort of conclude, especially like the last 3 minutes of the track. It becomes a little bit more post punk in some ways, and sort of, there's some actual rhythm and a little bit more guitar strumming and guitar sounds as that sort of goes on at the last couple of minutes. So I think it's kind of a nice conclusion that's sort of feeling like euphoric, and then it sort of evolves into a little bit more post punk as well, and kind of comes out of the ambient. So it's a nice themed album as well. I really like the artwork as well. Just the overall sound is really nice. It definitely has that, wouldn't say a low budget '90s sounding album, but it's as far as like just the overall dynamics of the album. But it does sound like a very underground kind of '90s album. CD and vinyl. It's just, it's well recorded, but it's kind of bypassing the loud wars that the late '90s um, sort of started, and in that way, it's nice that it kind of, I mean that in a good terms, is it's kind of the better of the sounding '90s albums, and it's not really like overly processed or overly mastered or anything like that. But it does feel a little bit hollow sounding, and that's probably because of the theme of Antarctica. It's verging on colder, but it's not cold. It's not cold post punk ambient. It's still a little bit kind of dreamy. I wouldn't say it's warm or it's really cold. It's kind of more dreamlike in some ways. But overall, it's an enjoyable album. By the way, I gave Sunrise 3.75 stars. It's my favorite track on here. When I add up the stars, it's 9.5 stars divided by three, which is a 3.16. Um, so I give the album a 72 out of 100. I think it's a very good album. If you're into shoegaze music, if you're into ambient music and drone music, I think you'll really enjoy this. If you're sort of coming from the post punk side and sort of coming from a maybe abstract or avant garde sort of guitar effects sort of side, then I would say it sort of includes a little bit of ambient in that sound, and maybe you'll like it for that reason. But it evolves and it is very drony in a way, and so you do have to be into tracks that take a good amount of time to evolve. But it's a nice, it's a good album to play on the background and enjoy, and in some ways it kind of sneaks up on you because there's not a lot of like feeling of accomplishment when you're listening to this record. Like I was saying, like the second track feels like a bridge. The last track is like it finally gets to like a crescendo. The first track, it resonates for quite a long time until minute 17 or 18 minutes when it sort of evolves into a folk. So you're talking about out of 41 minutes, maybe two tracks that sort of evolve in something, and one track that sort of is in between track that bridges the two. So you don't have a lot of uh, there's not a lot of pop moments in here. There's not a lot to sort of sink your teeth into. It's kind of a very background music, and but it sits nicely as a background album, and I think if you don't expect too much from it, you'll enjoy it. But I think if you're expecting some sort of magnificent record, you might be a little disappointed because things don't change very much in the album. But that's not a knock on it anyway. It's just what it is. It's just what it's trying to do. But I just feel like conveying that to you just to meet your expectations. If you haven't heard this, but be curious to know your thoughts on Wendy and Carl, the album called Antarctica. This is Bliss Out Part Two, Volume Two. There's also a Volume One. Um, this is one of their more desirable records when I look at their career. But yeah, just if your overall thoughts, I'm curious if you've heard the album um, and what your thoughts are. But yeah, I give it a 72 out of 100. I think it's a very good album, and you'll be hard pressed to find something that's guitar and drone and ambient in the 90s that's better than this in many ways. All right, well, thanks for your time. I appreciate you watching, and look forward to the next review with you.
Where it comes.